everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Terms and News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we will be discussing few important terms from the perspective of your exam which have been in news this very week. Starting with the first term, that is Masala bonds. So let us understand this term first and then we will go and understand why this has been in news. When we talk about Masala bonds, as the name suggests, it is a type of a bond. So let us start with understanding what exactly is a bond. When we talk about bond, it is nothing but a type of debt instrument that is used in financial markets. So let's just say there is a person who is an investor. That means he has some money that he wants to invest, and there is a company that needs some money. So that means this will be the borrower or the company. So in this situation, what this company will do, it will bring in bonds and investor will give in some money. So investor has lended some money, let's just say 100 rupees, and as per the bond, if the 100 rupees are to be returned in certain time period, against that certain interest would be paid to the investor, and for that time this person will keep the bond. After that time, this bond is compensated for. That means the investor will get this money back with the interest after the time has been completed. Now when we are talking about Masala bonds, these are the bonds that signify that they are rupee denominated. That means investor will be giving the money in the currency of Indian rupee. Now why do we need Indian rupee denominated bonds? We need Indian rupee denominated bonds when the companies want to raise money from the international market but in rupee. So the investor will be lending in Indian rupees, not in foreign currencies, and that is why the risk which is associated with the exchange rate, that will be deleted. For example, if I am taking 100 rupees and giving a bond against it, I have to return 100 rupees with the interest that has been decided. If it would have been done in dollars, if I have taken $100 and in terms of rupees that has changed, like we are seeing right now, it has crossed the 90 mark. So let's just say I got $100 back 5 years. That time it was 70 rupees. Now it is 90 rupees. That means I have to give 20 rupees more per dollar, right? So that will be saved. Now this particular category, the word masala comes to symbolize the heritage of spices that is in India, and it was launched by IFC, which is a World Bank group, in 2014 itself. Later it has been used by Indian firms and it has been used for the purpose of raising funds. Now what it helps in, it reduces the dependence on domestic debt markets, it helps in attracting foreign capital for long-term infrastructure, and it is being used by NBFCs, state governments, PSU companies, etc. Now when we talk about masala bonds, they have been in news because in Kerala it has created a whole situation where Enforcement Directorate issued a notice to the CM of Kerala, because Kerala was one of the first state governments to tap into masala bonds for funding and infrastructure related activities. So this has raised this term in news all of a sudden, and from the perspective of your exam, it becomes important because as this particular instrument, it helps in reducing India's external debt vulnerability because payment happens in rupees. It helps in attracting long-term stable capital. It promotes INR, that is rupees, as an international currency, and it is also useful for municipal finance, urban development, renewable energy, etc. And as I said, from the perspective of exam, masala bonds is directly related to RBI regulations, ECB, and capital account convertibility as well. Now on this note, moving to the next term that is in news today, that is GLP-1 drugs. When we talk about GLP-1, it is basically a hormone analog, glucagon-like peptide 1 hormone analog. Now this is used generally for two specific purposes: to manage type 2 diabetes and also for obesity as well as weight loss therapy. It is a very simple mechanism. When it is used in the medicinal form, it slows the gastric emptying that goes, metabolism is slowed down, the digestion is slowed down, and it increases the insulin secretion, which helps in reducing the appetite, and it leads to major weight loss as well. Now, this particular common drug has been commonly used in Ozempic, Mounjaro, and all of these are weight loss drugs that we have seen, and they are used in an injectable manner. The reason GLP-1 drugs are in use because WHO has issued the first ever guidelines related to GLP-1 drugs, specifically when we are talking about the GLP-1 drugs related to obesity, because there were no proper guidelines as of now at the global level, and with the recent uprise in the usage of Ozempic, Mounjaro, all of these were raising concerns. Now, if we talk about the significance of particularly GLP-1 drugs, they can be significantly effective in India's health infrastructure to reduce the non-communicable disease burden that we get to see, especially in terms of diabetes and obesity. They have a huge potential. India has a huge potential in terms of pharma exports, where we aim to become the pharmacy of the world. GLP-1 drugs give us a huge scope and window here. But the problem here is this is going to solve the end point where obesity and diabetes in terms of symptoms, because the main fulcrum here, the main problem here is urban lifestyle. It also raises questions related to insurance coverage, health inequality, because if you talk about GLP-1 drugs and the medicines they are commonly used in, they are expensive and they are beyond the middle class and lower class income groups. So, this was for GLP-1 drugs. Moving to the next term that we are looking into today is Lahar. Now, Lahar is nothing but a volcanic mud flow. Now, in that mud flow, there is ash which is present, pyroclasts which are present, rocks, water and debris. Now, let me show this through an example here, through a picture here. If this is the volcano which is erupting, then the mud flow of the particular rock which is present there, which also includes the ash, pyroclasts, rock material, this will be a slurry which will include mud as well. So, this is what is known as Lahar. That is the mud flow of volcanic material. It is usually triggered when we see new eruptions and there is excessive melting of snow or glaciers, if there is heavy rain which is mixing with the volcanic ash, or if there is presence of crater lake and it collapses. The speed of lahars can go up to 100 km/h, capable of destroying settlements, and they are usually found in volcanic arcs. So, if you talk about a volcanic arc, no better place of their presence than the Pacific Ring of Fire. So, you will find them in Indonesia, Philippines, Japan. All of these regions you will find the presence of volcanic arcs, and lahars, that the volcanic mud flows, are a common situation in presence of all of these scenarios. Now, when we talk about Lahar, recently it has been in news because of Mount Semeru, because Mount Semeru erupted way back last month, but it gradually induced the mud flow, and because of that there have been heavy damages which have been caused. Now, if we talk about such terms, they become very important from the perspective of GS1 and the topic where we address Earth's interior and volcanism. They are also directly related to disaster management, GS3 paper. And when we talk about from our perspective in disaster management, you also have to look into India's early warning systems, especially when we talk about the Andaman volcanic arc, because that is the only place where we have an active volcano. This becomes also relevant in terms of international relations, because such eruptions can impact global supply chains and aviation as well. If you want to take the example, you can take the example of Haile Gubbi here in Ethiopia, where the eruption led to supply chain disruption and also aviation disruptions. However, lahars were not seen in this particular scenario. Apart from that, moving to the next term that we are doing today are red category industries. So, when we talk about the classification of industries based on pollution index, that is 0 to 100, CPCB classifies them into 4 categories, and the highly polluting category is the red industries, where the pollution index is more than 60. For example, thermal power plants, cement plants, iron and steel, petrochemicals, tanneries and hazardous chemical manufacturing. Such industries require strict clearance, environmental audits and also continuous monitoring. Can you tell me in the comment section which are the other categories which are present in the classification based on pollution index? Now, if we talk about why in news, they have been in news because amidst the extreme air pollution that we are seeing in Delhi NCR, the center has set a deadline for Delhi NCR and the states around it, especially for red industries. If they do not install the monitors in terms of air pollution control and displaying in terms of emissions that are happening, then they will face closures by December 31. That is why they are in news. When we talk about the significance, such classification help in better environmental regulation because such environmental regulators bring in better pollution control norms. It also directly affects India's commitment that we talk about as per Paris Agreement, NCAP, hazardous waste rules, and we have seen such question in UPSC Prelims quite often. It is also very much associated with Environmental Protection Act of 1986, making it an important pointer for your exam. Now moving to the next particular term that we are doing today is repo rate. So when we talk about repo rate, first we have to understand a basic concept in terms of monetary policy. We talk about monetary policy. It is that policy which makes sure the money supply in the economy is controlled to achieve certain macroeconomic goals, and this is done by our central bank, that is RBI. Now there are multiple ways to execute the monetary policy, in which we have two types of tools. We have qualitative tools and we have quantitative tools. Because we are in dearth of time, we will not be getting into detail. In quantitative tools, we have another segment, that is liquidity adjustment facility, which is given by RBI to banks so that they can borrow from RBI or give money to RBI to park their funds, and that is done through repos. What are repos? Repurchase agreements. Now, if the RBI is giving money to the bank, then that can be done through repos, and if RBI is parking the bank's fund, that is done through reverse repo. Now, when we are talking about repo rate, it is basically in simple language, it is nothing but at the rate at which RBI lends short-term funds to the banks. It is part of the liquid adjustment facility. If we talk about repo rate, you have to understand, if the repo rate increases, that means it will be costlier for banks to borrow money from RBI for short term. So if that becomes costlier, banks will decrease credit creation. If the credit creation decreases, the supply with the people in the economy that decreases, then they will demand less and it will control the price rise if it is seen in the economy. Reverse repo rate, if we talk about, it is the rate at which RBI borrows from banks. Usually it is not that RBI is borrowing. Banks tend to park their funds in RBI, and that is done through reverse repo rate. Can you tell me in the comment section what is the difference at present in terms of basis points? What is the difference between reverse repo rate and repo rate? The reason we are talking about repo rate today is the fact that yesterday itself RBI monetary policy was revised and the repo rate was cut down by 25 basis points to 5.25%. That means as the repo rate has been cut down, that means the credit creation, loan taking ability for banks enhances, the credit creation becomes easier, and this will give more money for public, there will be increased supply. In other contexts, because the repo rate has decreased, it will also see that your AMIs will reduce, the rate of interest on your loans will be reduced. I have explained all of this in a separate video, you can go and watch that. Another term I will briefly do here is basis points. So when we are talking about basis points, I will give you a simple understanding. 100 basis points is equal to 1%. So as it is saying 25 basis points, that means before this it was 5.50, it has been reduced to 25 basis points, 5.25%. When we are talking about repo rate, becomes very important from the perspective of exam because it is one of the key tools that RBI uses for price stability and also inflation control. And this is the primary objective of Monetary Policy Committee, that is to set the repo rate. It determines multiple factors in the economy, be it demand, be it the growth, the inflation, consumer spending, and also GDP expansion. Furthermore, this serves as one of the core concepts, be it for your prelims. There have been questions which have been directly asked from this very concept, GS3, and also all RBI related questions. Now moving to the next and the last term for the day, that is cold wave. So if we talk about cold wave as a term, IMD has a proper labeling to it. Indian Meteorological Department says that a cold wave will be declared when the temperature, minimum temperature, is less than or equal to 4 degrees Celsius. This is one condition. Or if the temperature departure from normal is more than minus 4.5 degrees Celsius to minus 6.4 degrees Celsius. That means, let's just say the temperature of today should have been, as per the earlier records, 20 degrees Celsius, but as of now it is 15 degrees Celsius. So it will be a cold wave situation. Or there is a third scenario, if it is normal more than or equal to 10 degrees Celsius, but actual is less than or equal to 10 degrees Celsius, and there is a large deviation. In all of these situations, it can be marked as a cold wave. Severe cold wave will go beyond this particular scenarios. It is usually caused in situations where there are clear skies and there is a rapid heat loss. That means if the sky is clear and the heat is rising, there is an absolute increased heat loss. Western disturbances that we get to see, snowfall in Himalayas which pull the cold air southwards, and also the urban geometry and planning which reduces the radiation absorption. So all of these situations can be responsible for cold wave, and recently they have been in news because cold wave conditions are expected to prevail in Delhi, Uttar Pradesh and certain parts of northern states. That has been highlighted. From the perspective of your exam, if we talk about, it becomes absolutely significant because it has a huge impact on agriculture. When we are talking about cold wave, it impacts crops because of frost damage, be it potato, mustard, wheat and vegetables. And also it is a public health concern in terms of hypothermia, cardiorespiratory issues, and that is why it calls for appropriate urban planning, where it keeps in mind the urban heat and cold resilience planning. It becomes important from GS1 perspective and also disaster management. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.